buy-in, and ownership all across the district, and which is one of the things I would imagine the board has a great interest in. So I'm going to share screens with you, lay out our agenda for this evening, and look forward to getting board input on some key components of the strategic plan. Give you a minute for it to thumbs up. I see it. I can see the presentation. Just want to be sure it's there. We have 3 goals for today's session. I want to share where we are in the strategic planning process. I want to garner feedback from the Beaverton School Board for the mission statement. If you remember, I started this the last time I gave you an update, and you had to end the meeting a little bit quicker than I had anticipated. So we're going to pick up that today. And then there's a component in the strategic plan called foundations, which I will share with you in a minute. It's really the bigger district initiatives. We want to get feedback from the board to start to gather input from you, combined with that of the senior leadership, district leadership, on what these foundations will be. So those are the big 3 for our work today. I'm going to do some reminders, so bear with me, but I just think it's so important to ground ourselves in the assumptions that drive and shape the processes that the team at the Scholar First uses when we strategic plan with districts. The first is that this process presents the districts with the opportunity to pause and assess progress towards its goals and areas for growth. When you do it right, it engages a broad stakeholders for listening and learning and grounds the plan in that current reality. We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about that. And then using current reality, we pivot to research and best practices to create a dynamic and comprehensive plan for improvement. And when it's done well, things should be even aligned more deeply. You should have greater ownership and focus, which is really informs the methodology that we use. And the road to excellence is paved with a co-constructed, clear, student-centered plan. And so you're going to see evidence of that all throughout. When you think about where districts are, and I work in, lots of districts all across the country, I will tell you, you see a lot of misalignment. And you've got boards wondering why we haven't achieved what we need to achieve. As long as that misalignment is happening from the central office to the classroom, it's very difficult for schools to improve at scale. And so we've engaged in some pretty comprehensive work with both the central office team, but also by having large numbers of teachers looking at research and then identifying what we would describe as best practice for strategy work. We think that that's going to really position you for continued improvement, which leads to the right-hand side, which is alignment. When I first did my intro with you, I laid out some guiding principles that the Scholar First operates within. One is that we want to inspire the next iteration of improvement. It's done with the district, not to or for the district. It has to be anchored in student voice. So remember the vision statement, we started with listening to students. It involves co-construction with broad stakeholder group. You could easily take your goal areas and go in a room with 10 people and write strategies. We didn't do it that way. We had over 150 staff who came to the event at the church after school, and they've grappled with it. In fact, I'm meeting with them later this week to see where the refinements are. You're going to see our goals, and no longer is it best practice to have goals that are not student-centered. We will share with you those student-centered goals that are equity-informed strategies. And you heard me talk about research, and you heard me talk about alignment from the central office. So these are the guiding principles. I just want to re-anchor everything in that. And then I've shared this research with you, but one of the most important components is that first bullet, that high-performing districts have 5 or fewer initiatives. That's no more. And the buildings have 3 or fewer. No more. And so I think that's a critical thing to focus on, and that really does inform some of what you're about to hear. The University of Washington, University of Minnesota looked at all these schools, and they found that there was not a single school that improved absent talented leadership. So a lot of the strategy work should be about building teacher leaders, building leaders, just pipeline work and thinking about that. This is a reminder of all the groups that have been involved in your strategic plan. Um, Lots of different stakeholders. When the plan is brought to the board for approval, you're going to see a infographic that will tell you how many people had a role to play and whose input shaped the plan, which again will help with this implementation. So here is the milestones, and I think this sums it up. Student informed vision of excellence and core values. Board members, you gave us feedback. We took your feedback, and that DLT under the leadership of your Deputy Superintendent Heather Cordy, they actually revised it. We have a central office theory of action, and I'll explain what that is and why it's critical. We have framed and named goal areas that are student centered. We're not merging adult strategies. It's all about scholar student outcomes. The group has worked to draft outcomes, meaning that you're going to have very specific ways to measure improvement towards the plan. You heard me talk about the 150 building and school and district office staff who met on the 16th of February. Maybe it was the 5th. No, it was the 16th, where we did large scale co-construction of strategies. And the next core planning team meeting, the team will draft 4 to 5 promise statements, which some folks will call a tagline, that we're going to send out to all stakeholders, 4 or 5. So families, students, and staff can vote on the one that is the most resonant for the strategic plan. And then today, board members, you're going to give us feedback on the mission statement, which we have not yet moved forward with. We wanted to get board words and phrases so that the DLT could actually do the framing. And you can see the next steps are to review and refine the plan after that so that it aligns to school improvement planning. And then the draft will be complete, and then we'll seek board approval sometime, I'm predicting, in either April or May, and with the new plan being launched in June. This is the vision of the student experience. We deliberately use very specific language. This vision will encapsulate an academic part of the child, a social emotional part of the child, and a belonging and identity part. We listened to student voice. We took the feedback from the students, and that the core planning team, they drafted up some language, and then our district leadership team of about 30 people framed up this vision of the student experience. We want to be very specific here because every part of this is what you want to measure. And I've shared this with you last time, board members. So I want to just take a minute for you to kind of take that in. And then I'm going to move into the mission statement where I want to get some input from the board because it's not been crafted yet. The mission statement is really a statement that describes how the organization will behave to accomplish the vision. I'm going to say that again. It's a statement that describes how the organization will behave to accomplish the vision. So that's our vision. So to be more specific, the district's mission statement describes why the district exists, who it serves, and what actions it's taking to accomplish the vision. So let me let you process that, why the district exists, who it serves, and what actions it's taking to accomplish the vision. Here's a sample of one. And I've deliberately highlighted parts and underlined parts. So why it exists and who it serves. Garfield School District will empower all students to discover and achieve their potential. That's why it exists and who it serves. The actions it's taking in an inclusive, inspiring, and excuse the double ands there, and innovative culture of learning. Okay? So that's one sample. Here's another one. We will prepare all students for college and life by providing a challenging curriculum that connects students' that connects students' lives and their future in a safe, supportive, and nurturing environment. So the first part, we will prepare all students for college and life. That's why the district exists and who it serves. And the actions are by providing a challenging curriculum that connects students' lives and their future in a safe, supportive, and nurturing environment. I just pulled these off the internet. These are just samples of mission statements. Sometimes you'll see them and they don't have the last part, which is what or how the district will act to accomplish it. So again, this is the current vision that has been drafted by your large committee and vetted by principals and teachers. So my question to the board is, here's another mission statement from another district. We'll empower all students to discover and achieve their potential. That's why it exists and what they want students to do and how they're going to do it in an inclusive, inspiring, and innovative culture of learning. That's another sample. Short statement, but really capturing what's here. So board members, what I'd like you to take a minute to do individually first, I want you to think about the vision statement that you've seen, and I want you to jot down keywords or phrases that you think should be included in the mission statement. I want you to do that individually. Spend the next 5 minutes doing that. And what I'm going to ask you to do is share and then put this in the chat box so we capture it. And then we're going to take your feedback and a group is going to draft the mission statement based on board feedback. And Superintendent Balderas and team will bring it back to you so you can see it and give one look over before we include it in the strategic plan.
Can you put it back on the
vision
part?
Thanks. Yep, absolutely. That makes sense. There we go. I'm going to go back to the template just one more time just so you see it. The beginning part is what we will do. I'm sorry, who you'll do it for. It's a brief statement about we'll empower students. The second one says we'll prepare our students for life. And then the second part is what you will do. That's the second part of that sentence. It's one sentence though. And here's another example. Just so you can see some examples. You're writing down words or phrases that you think should be included. If you're feeling really brave, you could even draft up a statement, and we'll take all of that feedback to the group. But no pressure to write a complete one, just to say high priority words or phrases. Board members, I'm wanting to make sure we can capture your comments that you're going to say out loud. So if you write them down, and then I'm assuming that you can give them to Superintendent Balderas and we'll hold them for the group. Okay, do you feel like you've had enough time so that we can hear from each of you? Or do you need more time?
I think everybody's ready.
Okay, all right, let's hear from each board member. And I'm being told that folks will record what you're saying. I also think it's a good idea if you've got written notes to hand them over so we get them exactly. Okay.
Board members, anybody want to go first, or we want to do like a round robin? Maybe we start with Eric and go this way.
Okay, I have a couple. I didn't get a full statement, but I kind of stuff was in my head. Some was from like almost last time though. So inclusively prepare all students for post-high school opportunities. Kind of resonate what we had before, but still in my head. Number two is kind of a bullet. I thought maybe engage students to explore their passions. So I feel like, maybe there's a lot of opportunities in the world, and hopefully we can help them figure out part of those here in schools. And then engender lifelong learners or scholars, just kind of some kind of comment on, the lifelong aspect of learning and then getting that passion.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like the part where it says empower student to achieve their potential. And how do we do that is, for me, safety and security is important for the students in the building. They should feel safe and inclusive environment, challenging curriculum, which provides them opportunities to excel, and making sure that they have the joy for learning.
Okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
I would add, I was looking at the vision statement, and the part that says a future I want really spoke to me, in that hook into school that every student should see something in their school experience that is their future and where they want to go. I also liked supported and challenged as a pair. I felt like that was a really nice pair, because we want to always be challenging our students. But the more we challenge our students, the more we have to offer that support as well. And so I would just kind of leave it there without seeing everything in context in the whole statement. Those are just a couple of thoughts. Karen?
I was thinking about BSD creating the conditions for each and every student to thrive. And I also connected with the words supporting, challenging, and validating them throughout their educational experience. And I like the wording that Eric used with so that they can explore their passions and achieve the future they desire and beyond.
Powerful words.
I was along the same vein. I really like lifelong learner. Words like individual determination, personal advancement, inclusive collaboration, and then, that we inspire, that education is about inspiring us at whatever level it is, that there's inspiration in why we learn. I didn't try to string them all together, just word salad.
That's what we want. Lots of word salad. You can already start to hear themes around challenge, support, this connection to and relevancy. You can hear some of that already coming out across all board members.
Ogana?
So I am challenged, supported, and successful in my learning. And the phrase I came up with is the school district will provide students with the tools and the support they need to be successful within the classroom and beyond.
Is that everyone?
Yeah, that is. We have one board member who's excused tonight.
So there's definitely some themes that we're hearing. And so what I'm proposing that we do, we're going to take all of your words, as one board member described it, word salad. The words that rose to the top more often will definitely be prominent. We're going to draft the mission statement. And I'm sure that at your next session, we'll have someone who will bring it back to you to let you see it. But this is what will be the key ingredient to framing up the mission statement that will accompany the strategic plan. Questions, thoughts before I transition? Does that make sense?
This is Karen. One of the things that I think would be important, and as we think about our mission, is in the vision we have a lot of wording that the students chose, is my understanding. So how do we include their words within the mission statement so it still belongs to them as what our mission should be? So it's just a wondering, like a thought that I'd like to share with the group that's coming up with the statement, to include as much as possible the wording of the students.
From this vision statement?
Yeah, if possible.
Yep. That's why it was seeded by students, because once you build upon it and utilize it, you're absolutely doing that. So thank you. Okay, so next step, we'll bring back a draft for you to see. Here are the core values that Dr. Cordy and team framed up. We shared them with you last time, if you remember, and you gave us feedback. And I don't actually have the markup, but I will tell you your feedback was used to do a revision. Dr. Cordy, is Dr. Cordy here?
She is.
Maybe not.
She's here.
So I wonder if she might be able to give comment if there's about where we made tweaks.
She's coming to the microphone, Dr. Campbell.
She's been incredible, by the way, to partner with and work with on your team, Superintendent Balderas.
Good evening, Superintendent Balderas and board members. Hello, Dr. Campbell. Good to see you again. So a couple of the most prominent changes that we made without having my notes in front of me, but based on your feedback, thank you so much, thank you, was around the very first core value had belonging and respect. Respect was in there, and we received feedback from you about that and what that means to you with your different perspectives and experiences. And we changed that word after much contemplation, the team that was working on this, to dignity, belonging and dignity. We also, one of the common pieces of input from the board was around, we referenced the word, when we were talking about students, we had the word scholars in there, and we changed that to students. Taking a look at the notes. Thank you so much, Carrie. Appreciate that. Those were the key pieces. There were other impacts around words like growth and commitment and experiences, but the really big takeaways were around the use of the word respect and reference to students. And there was other wordsmithing that happened as well as a result of your feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy.
You're
So
welcome.
board member, it was just important for me to illustrate how your feedback actually played out in the value statement. So I want to talk to you a little bit about something that I've been doing with this central office, and it's called a theory of action. And often when you see strategic plans, the theories of action have not been fleshed out. And so what happens is when you get to the place where you're actually identifying strategies, you can pull them from all over the place. This process is so important. And so I want to give you some research around it. And I've got a pretty thick text on the slide right now, but I don't want you to necessarily read all of it. I want you to, I'm going to give you the overview. This particular researcher, Isabel Stevenson, talks about that when you are focused on district and school improvement, you need to focus on ensuring these 6 essential conditions. And I'm not going to read all 6 of them. But the first is that the strategy employed is powerful enough to reach the goal. So we did some strategy work, and they're not quite done yet for you to see them. But we used research to really identify what we call high yield strategies. And here's the second part, and this is really where the theory of action comes in. There must be this through line from the central office to what students will experience in the classroom, and it must be clearly articulated. That's what a theory of action is. It's an if-then statement, and we work backwards from our vision that you just looked at, and we said, if that's our vision, what will educators have to do? What will principals have to do? And what will the central office have to do? If you don't align that, you will not have the right kind of you'll have people doing competing things. And so we really spent some time there, and I want to show you what this looks like. So it's that item number 2 that this theory of action accomplishes. So what is a theory of action? And this particular slide outlines it. It's a hypothesis about what will happen when a set of strategies is implemented. And developing a theory of action requires using critical judgment about what strategic actions will lead to what desired results. It's backwards mapping, is really how I would describe it. Why do you create them? Because you're going to have limited resources and a lot of challenges and limited time. And if you don't take the time to backwards map, you are not going to be as coherent and focused and strategic. The other reason you do it is that it allows you to really articulate why you're taking this set of actions. And it also creates cohesion and collaboration amongst the team. So this particular researcher, Elena Aguilar, is well published on the why of this, a district leader and who's done a lot of work around district and school improvement. This is another one from the NEK Foundation that came out in 2022 that outlines why a theory of action. You experience breakthroughs in your thinking. You increase your agreement and alignment about how change will happen. It promotes equity in the pursuit of goals. You better acknowledge and address power differences, because when you're doing this, a central office person, they're having to put themselves in the shoes of the educator and the student and a principal, and everybody's doing this from different vantage points. Better understand the roles and expectations of different contributors. And also you understand where you're going to invest your time and resources, because remember, effective districts only have 4 to 5 strategies that they're initiatives that they're focused on, and the schools can only focus on 2 or 3. And then you're going to be better equipped to measure the work that you're doing. So this is, again, another level as to why this theory of action is important. I recognize not a lot of folks who strategic plan take the time to do this, but I believe that this will allow us to be way more focused and to pick those strategies that are highest yield. So I'm going to share with you the theory of action. And this is what this document looks like. Now, my goal isn't for you to read it all. I just want you to understand what we did. You see the visions? We took that vision statement and we put it in the right-hand column, and we broke it up into parts. And we said, if a learner is to belong in, to say, I belong and I matter, what will the educator have to do? What will the principal have to do? And what will the central office have to do? And we did that for all the components of the vision. And below, and they're currently right now completing this, what will we have to learn? Because often we don't think about the professional development. Based on the top part, we outline the professional development. Then the rest of the other parts of the vision, I'm informed and engaged member of my community. I see a future I want. What will the educator do? What will the principal do? What will the central office do? Then this particular group has already finished fleshing out the professional development that they think they're going to need. You can see this other, we just take it out and we chunk it and we work backwards. And then when we meet for strategy day, they have this as a reference document so we can be sure all of our strategies support educators in doing this, in doing this. So this column, we know what we want those strategies to do. And this group is still working on completing the professional development component. So I want to stop. This is a theory of action. This allows us to really be thoughtful about how we're going to accomplish the vision. And that's where the student, what I call centered parts of this. Sometimes districts will use this theory of action if they have a challenge, like they might use it for, we've got a discipline challenge with disproportionality, and they'll do a problem of practice and work backwards. I think we need to also use this for our vision, for our hopes or our aspirations, not just when we're trying to figure out a challenge, but how do we actually realize the ideal state? So that's what this is. There's no role necessarily here for the board other than to let you know that we've done this with your central office team. And this will be a reference document for them for the next 4 to 5 years as they engage and ensure much of what's in the strategic plan is effective. I'm going to stop to see if this makes sense or if you have questions.
Becky, and then Karan.
I found it interesting you said that this isn't really something the board, maybe not from an operational everyday side, but I think it is so important when you're changing a culture that it has to be from all elements and that we are using the same language and reinforcing the same things, whether we're visiting with a principal or with a student or with a parent. So I would say that even though the board maybe not from an operational side of that, but it's really important that we buy in as well to that theory of action.
Powerful.
Karan.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What Becky just noted, I think it'd be helpful to us to have another column of what will the board do to support this work. Perhaps as we look at our board goals, and then have the superintendent put his on there too, just so that we're aligning our theories of action all the way across the system. Perhaps.
If I could do a cartwheel, I would. That's exactly what you should be thinking. That's exactly right. And so you're absolutely on the mark. So at from where you sit at the policy level, at the sponsorship level, at the communication level in the community, what kinds of things can you do to ensure that this happens?
And I want to just check in, Ugana, if you have any questions or comments while we're just, raise your virtual hand and I'll check the screen and call on you.
I will, thanks.
And if we had one more column on there, would be our community, like our partners and things, like how could they be part of this theory of action as well? So you have our learners there, but then also our community. I know that that's something that's very important to Dr. Balderas, is making sure that the whole community, parents and community are involved as well.
When you create them initially, they're for the group that you have actual, what I would say, the ability to convene and ask. So we know, and what is the district able to directly control? So that's the other condition of these statements. But I absolutely agree. In fact, when I think about the community, the component of that is where you should see some of the central office actions in engaging and listening to the community listed in this column as a strategy. So want you as board members to know that we're being very intentional before we actually got to strategy. So I'm going to now share with you the actual student-centered goals.
Dr. Campbell, I think we had one other comment from Board Member Gar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My apologies.
When I look at the vision statement, there was the number 2, it says, I believe in myself and my community believes in me. And I think in our strategic plan, I didn't hear the community engagement part of it, and I would like to put that in so that we make sure that, and how do we bring that in our theory of action? So because that's an important piece, and yeah, just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So I want to share with you the 4 student-centered goals. And you'll notice all of these are student-centered goals. And the reason I'm stressing that, you will see strategic plans that will have things like robust professional development or even facilities. And we separate those things out. They're going to be in the foundations, and that's what the board's going to give us feedback on. But I want to share with you these 4 goal areas and where they come from. There is research that talks about there's when you think about measuring success for a student, you look at the social emotional aspect, the belonging aspect, and the academic parts. That's the whole child. When I was a principal, staff developer, even assistant superintendent, we spent a lot of time in the academic arena. We did not look at the social emotional and the belonging component. And so these goals break out this way. Goal 1, safe and thriving. And the names for these goal areas, your district leaders came up with these names. All I told them is the kind of category. This first one is typically called social emotional, as well as identity. They've just coined it safe and thriving. The other 3 are academic areas. Goal 2 is early learning. Your district is calling it Pillars for Success, pre-K through 3. Goal 3 is progress and achievement on standards. This goal pretty much describes that every student leaves each grade on grade level. That's what this is pushing. Goal 4 is college and career ready. Some districts call it future ready. Some call it post-diploma ready. Your team of leaders, lots of them, have come together, and these are the names of the goal areas. These are all student-centered goals. And then here's sample foundations. The foundations is like the pillars on which these goals are sitting, right? And I've given you 2 district samples. This is not what yours are. We have to hear from you, get feedback from you, and feedback from your leadership team about what these are, but I just want to give you some examples. So when we're talking about, for example, the community component, one of the initiatives that I often will see in the foundations is authentic and culturally responsive family engagement. That's where they tackle that. Dynamic and coherent teaching and learning systems and structures. Other examples, robust hiring and retention of staff, of high quality, inclusive-minded staff. There are all kinds of things that you can put here. I suggest no more than 4, because whatever those 4 are, it takes initiatives like this are big, and to actually do them well, it will take us several years to do them well, because they're typically done at the central office. This is what you're going to think about, what you've read in the listing and learning, and provide feedback on. But let me just tell you how these goals will work for the schools. For next year's school improvement plans, each school will have 2 goals. One is already chosen for them, safe and thriving. Everyone has to have that goal. It's not an option. And what the teams were doing when we met a little bit over a week and a half ago, they framed up strategies, 10 to 15 for each of these. And I'm going to model for you what that looks like from the research, and to help drive what was in the theory of action. Every school will have goal 1. Your level will determine your second goal area. For example, high schools will have goal 1 and goal 4. Elementary schools, goal 1 and goal 2, or goal 1 and goal 3. So they could have goal 1 and the early learning goal of goal 2, or they could choose goal 1 and goal 3, depending on their data and what their needs assessment says. And middle schools will have goals 1 and goal 3. And why do we focus this way? Because remember the research, you cannot have schools focused on all the goals, and some of the goals wouldn't make sense, but they're very tailored. And one of the things that I'll be focusing with the team on for implementation, the implementation year, is how do you convene the schools to progress monitor the work of buildings on these goals. So I'm going to stop. Does this make sense?
Karen?
I think when you said you do a cartwheel, I'm ready to do a cartwheel here. Just because I think that the alignment is good. It makes sense, having just the two goals and having that safe and thriving with one other. The way that you described it makes sense to me. And they point to student success, and one area I'm curious to see what they put in those 4 boxes later on that are behind that one rectangle you have, just to see where community engagement, parent community engagement will lie within
Right here.
Right. I'm curious to see what our teams will come up with for those 4 boxes. And
Yeah, I'll say something that's probably I'll be a little bit strongly opinionated here. I have never seen a district not have authentic and culturally responsive. They might not use those words, but family engagement is key. Because what happens is when a school chooses, say these two, say I'm an elementary school, I have goal 1 and goal 3. When they select their strategies, often what has to happen, they have to pick 1 or 2 from this group down here. Does that make sense?
Yes. As I'm processing what you just said, if they pick 1 or 2 from that area, if my school were not to would pick the other 2 boxes on the right there, would that mean that,
right
there's
here.
2 blank boxes, right? Like technically there's
Yeah,
2
they
blank.
wouldn't. Yeah, they wouldn't.
I know they'll be full. I know there'll be 4 different items, right? There'll be
Yeah.
each one of those 4 boxes will be full. And,
Right.
What I think I just heard you say is like, obviously we can't have them do everything. There's no way in a school.
No,
So it'll just be interesting to see
how that plays out.
Like if you can choose not to engage community or not.
So the way districts have done this, and this is so the strategic plan is rolling it out is one thing, implementing is another, right? And so, for example, I just did this with the district in Washington, and what they do is you say you got goal 1 and goal 3. Here's your menu of strategies, and what is directed is everybody has to look at that list for community engagement and select 1 or 2. So it's not like an option. The rest of them, they wouldn't pick strategies from because they're going to be broader. They're not going to be driving the student-centered goals. But the student-centered goals cannot work without the strategies that are here, if that makes sense.
Becky?
So to get this right, one, I was going to kind of joke a little bit here that it's interesting the adjectives, how important these adjectives are. Dynamic, authentic. You can pick so many different adjectives, but what you're really getting down to in these gray boxes is the tactics, right? The tactics that
Yes.
everyone's going to take to actually implement. So it becomes, and it would be very hard, I would think, at any grade level to get success, thrive, without having some kind of engagement from someone beyond the students.
Yep.
So whatever way we want to call that out, it's going to be a tactic that it has to be
Right.
some kind of family engagement of some sort, whatever way we call it, correct?
Correct. And the other 3 boxes, the schools aren't choosing from those. They're going to be central office, like a lot of one district, for example, after listening and learning, heard a lot about class size. They heard a lot about facilities. That was not going to be one that the schools will choose. These are things that impact a larger district initiative. This is the only one where once they have their 2 goals and they're coming up with how we're going to achieve safe and thriving, they're going to look, because this will actually have a list of about 5 to 10 what we call best practices. They'll look and say, we're going to pick 1 or 2 from that. And that's when it does. The other 3 you don't do that with.
Sunita?
And you're going to show us the examples of those, what those 5 are? Because for instance, like safe and thriving, so
Uh-huh.
you said there would be 5 different things that they can choose from, and they will choose
No,
2?
I apologize. No, I'm sorry. So there are 10 to 15 strategies that we worked on last week. They're not ready yet. I'm meeting with the group this week to clean them up. I do have some samples, though, to show you from another district so you can see what I'm talking about. But yours are not ready to share. They're still creating them.
Okay, so from those 10 to 15 on, for each goal, the schools will choose maybe
Yes.
2 or 3?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thanks.
But the key was having teachers and principals and coaches and central office leaders come together. And that's what Dr. Cordy partnered with our team on, and with the complete and utter focus and vision of Superintendent Balderas, to have 150 people in a room. And now you're going to have more people who will own those strategies versus it being dictated to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Karan?
And this also makes me think, I know we're working on our integrative, like our funding. And so as we become more aligned, I think it'll support the work that the staff is doing on aligning our integrative funding sources and braiding funding. It just makes me think about the flexibility that we may need to have, because there's some things that are core amongst all of our schools or throughout all of our schools, and other pieces that will need to have some flexibility if a school picks 1 and 2 or 1 and 4 or 1 and 3, so that we have some core standards across all schools, but then also with regards to funding, some schools might need a little bit more or less depending, and for certain areas of their funding, depending on which goals they're working on.
You know, when we did this and we walked this through for 6 years, I don't know that that came up because what was listed in the strategy work, the reason we go through this is that's what the district will PD for the next 4 to 5 years. And you're going to see how we lay out some of the strategies. We categorize them as sustaining strategies, implementing, and new strategies. And the sustaining ones are things that already exist. Implementing are things that exist in pockets. And new are totally new because you want some innovation. And what I reminded the team is that all your strategies shouldn't be new. Because if they're all new, you can't do that. That's too much. It's impossible. You want a mixture, and I'll show you that in a minute because I've got a sample. You'll see what I'm talking about. You're asking all the right questions and thinking about this in all the right ways.
I'll stop after this one, but there's one more thing it made me think about was the words that are on there, safe and thriving. I mean, I can't disagree with any of those words in the green or blue boxes, but they also feel very, I don't know, just almost cold. And I don't know, I think once we start describing things in the different foundations or strategies, I think they'll bring them more to life.
Yep.
I wonder how our students will connect to those 4 goals. Like if I was a kid and I'm like, oh, like safe and thriving, I'm just curious about how our community or our students would connect with those 4 goals for themselves. But that's just something that came to mind.
Thank you. So board members, one of the most important things that you're going to do next is I'm going to ask you to start thinking about the themes from the listening and learning to see if you can start to generate foundational focus. And I think one of the things we agreed on is this community and responsive, and not using these words, but this authentic and culturally responsive family engagement is probably an important one. I'm hearing that. but we'll come to that in a minute. I just want to share with you what this looked like when they were generating strategies. Now, this is just sort of like what the instructional planning team, I call them IPT, it was 150 of them, and what they did. They committed to meeting that day, and then the groups have met on their own with their leads. We've got 2 or 3 people, a building principal, and someone at the district office who's leading each of these groups to be sure they're staying aligned with research. And they're giving us drafts. We've told them that because they only see their goal area and they can't see the others, they can't see where redundancy happens, that Dr. Cordy and her team will pull all this together and do the cleanup. And so we've made sure folks understand that. And I want to just share with you the definitions of the strategies before I share it again, the actual template. Sustaining are things that you're currently doing that are positively impacting students. Some districts, you have a lot of sustaining. And if you have a lot of sustaining, they've probably been working at doing coherent things and common things across the buildings. If you don't see a lot of sustaining, my experience is that it means that the buildings have been operating kind of like isolated, each doing their own thing. Because if it's sustaining, it's something that's happening across all schools. I'll give you a good example. In a lot of districts, PBIS is something that's happening across all schools. Another one could be guaranteed Bible curriculum, where we have curriculum that we bring teachers together, but everyone's using the framework, a lesson design template. We have a common template for how we design lessons. That's another one. Standards-based grading reporting across all schools. If it's being done pretty effectively, that's a sustaining practice. Implementing. We're piloting in this and we're doing it in pockets. And one example of this might be the use of formative assessment, meaning we constantly give kids feedback real time. And we see pockets of it. It's not everywhere yet, but it's starting. And when you put it here now, what it means is we want more people to use it, because anyone who knows the research knows that formative assessment feedback is about 0.7 effect size. I mean, it's almost unheard of to get anything above a 0.4 or 0.5, but that has a lot of runway for growth for kids. And then new and developing. This is where they've looked at research and they're looking to see what else should we be doing this in the research that we haven't done. So each of the groups have had a what I call a group of research articles that they've read, all the teachers, and based on that, they're framing this up. So let me show you what it looks like. Here are the outcomes for your goal areas. You have to have your outcomes so you can know what to measure. It's not enough just to have the goal area. So for example, each student feels safe, goal area 1. That means we have to survey students to ask them that. All identities are valued and all students are included. We'll have to survey students to ask them this. This is the outcomes that the groups have determined on how to measure this. Goal area 3, all students demonstrate progress toward an achievement of the standards. All students will demonstrate agency of their learning. All of these things, we'll be working with your psychometrician to come up with metrics to measure it all. And what you typically do, once this is established, you set a schedule to share this information out at a board meeting annually to say, here is the metrics, here are the outcomes, here's how we're progressing. And that vision is always front and center. So then they take those outcomes and they've got their research, and with their team lead, they identify strategies. I tell them no more than 15. And they label them a B or a D, meaning building. This is a building level strategy or a district level strategy. You need a mixture of both. You can't have all district, you can't have all building. And is it sustaining, implementing, new and developing? And the teams are completing these for each goal area. When you're done, you're going to have 2 deliverables. You're going to have a 4-page strategic plan that will have your goal areas, your core values, and all of that. And then you'll have an 8 to 10-page document that's internal for all the schools to utilize. That'll have the strategies. The strategy document will not be external. It'll be internal. So you're getting 2 versions. And here's an example of what one looks like. I know this is small writing. This is another district. This isn't your district. You can see they even call it something else. Their sustaining strategy is increase access to high quality preschool environments through collaborative professional development and community coordination for recruitment and enrollment for our most vulnerable children. That's what they want to do for their early learning one. Another sustaining strategy this means they're already doing it and they want to keep going on this one. All instructional staff are trained and implement research-based cell practices so that students can learn emotional literacy, self-regulation, and friendship skills using the CASEL framework. And if you know anything about this, you know CASEL is a leading expert on this. So these are the two things this district want to continue doing. Something new, they want to transition to kindergarten practices. Students and teachers experience aligned, cohesive, asset-based early learning practices and environments pre-K to kindergarten, and they have a framework for how they're going to go about doing that. Okay, so this is one. This district, because they have two sustaining ones, will be able to hit the ground pretty early because some of these things are already in existence. And the family engagement one, conduct WA Kids like family connection conferences. That's a state assessment. Pre-K to engage parents as trusted partners in their children's school success. So that's an I. That means that it's happening somewhat. They want it to happen everywhere. Here's another sample. This is the same district. Do you notice there are no sustaining strategies? So this is going to take a little bit longer. Everything's implementing. This is around the culture of safety and belonging. For example, under implementing and utilize the dignity framework as a standard for how we treat ourselves and each other. Implement intake conferences as a new and developing. Reducing physical harm through environmental design and utilizing an equity lens. They actually have a framework in this district called the equity lens that they use. Uganda?
Yeah, Dr. Campbell, I'm not quite sure that I understood the meaning of building or district.
Oh,
I'm sure you mentioned it and I missed it.
No worries.
What does that mean when you say a goal is in building, or if it's in district? What does that mean exactly?
Great question. So, for example, let me look at one of these. Securing equipment and implementing systems that are operationalized and maintained in all buildings. A school principal can't do that. That has to be done at the district level. So some things are beyond the control of the district office. Of the building principal. They have to happen at the system level, and more system level things are district level things. And the other way to think about it is, like, there's one under each student is empowered, establish and support MTSS in all schools. Principals can't do that individually. That's a district function. So it's a mixture of what the district will do to support schools so that it can actually happen at the building level. So it doesn't mean it won't happen at the building level. It means the district has to do this so that it can happen at the building level. Does that help?
Yeah, so so each of these must have either the district level or the building level. We can't have all building or all district.
Right, exactly. And some things won't have district if it's already established. Usually if it's sustaining, it's just the buildings are continue to do it. But this is what this district, how these leads have interpreted this. And it's still in draft form. The reason I like to break it out this way is to illustrate, first of all, everybody's in this game. It's not going to, I tell people there are no observers on a good strategic plan. There is no one in the spectator stands. Everyone's in the game. But there are some things that, unless the district creates the support, buildings can't implement them. And so that's why that balance.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Could
So
I-
this is what the team was working on.
One question I have is around, I can't remember, can you please remind me, our strategic plan is a 3-year, 5-year, what are we aiming for?
Typically, I would suggest about a 5-year plan at a minimum.
So as we are looking at our different strategies when they are putting all those strategies in there, I know you have the implementing or developing. It'd be nice to know figure out if that's a year one implementation, year two, year three, year four, like, at some point
Yeah,
breaking
they're
it out because they can't implement
Yeah.
everything.
Right. So what'll happen next, once it's approved, the district will actually do phasing of this because it can't all be done at once.
Right.
So they'll actually shade it and color code it and do a what I call a phasing activity.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, samples. And that's what your 150 folks are working on right now. They're creating this. That's what they're doing. Okay. So I want to go back to something Marzano said, that a loosely coupled system, it's hard to focus on student achievement system-wide. They tend to foster site-based management. So if you had all buildings in no district, that's really when you see loosely coupled. You need to have some things that everyone's doing. The other thing is, by saying something is sustaining means we want everybody doing that. One would be creating inclusive spaces where kids belong. I can't imagine someone would say some schools getting out on that. That's why goal 1, look at this. See the second bullet? Everybody having that goal 1 around safe. I mean, remember what your words were. I don't want to butcher it. Just safe and thriving. So here's what we've done. Look at what the research says. It says tightly coupled systems are the ones that can actually focus on student achievement, and they require non-negotiable goals be set for achievement and instruction. And one of the non-negotiables is that everyone has to have the safe and thriving. And everyone has to pick another goal. So we've come to some things that are just non-negotiables for the schools with this notion. And it says the goals must be established through a collaborative process. You've heard me talk about how many people were involved in the strategy generation and the naming. So we're trying, our efforts are towards being more tightly coupled than loosely coupled. Because ultimately, as board members and superintendent, you're responsible for all the schools. So what are we ensuring in terms of the experiences for our scholars all across the district? So foundations. And I've given you the 2 samples. What I'd like to do right now is have you to take a moment to think about, this is where we're going to focus right now. And I know you won't have it all fleshed out today because we're going to take your feedback. Superintendent Valderas will also look at the senior team, and we're going to merge these to come up with the foundations for the Beaverton School District. And what I want you to think about is, what are some priorities that you think should be accounted for in one of the 4 foundations? What priorities? Thinking about the listening and learning feedback, thinking about the conversation we had around community engagement maybe as one. I'd love to hear each of you share out loud, what do you think comes to mind when you think about foundations? And the way I've said them is priorities, because everything can't be a foundation. But if we had 4, what would you want to see in one of them? And I'm thinking we could do it the same way we did before, where each of you just shares, and we'll take note of this.
Dr. Campbell, can you put
Okay.
a slide up that contains some of the other foundations that other school districts have used, just so we kind of.
Yep.
Perfect.
I just did. I went back to it. And I'll tell you a couple of others that I've seen. One is around facilities. One is around, you've seen the districts, especially if they've had some financial challenges, something around fiscal alignment to ensure, fiscal responsibility and alignment. Hiring, I've seen one in that area. They're the things that are going to be critical for the schools to achieve goals 1, goal 2, goal 3, and goal 4. Which is why this family engagement one that I I don't remember the director who brought up why community is so important. You're absolutely on point. I think maybe a couple of you did. And you'll let me know.
I think you cut out there, Dr. Campbell.
Oh, I just said, and you can let me know when you're ready to share.
Okay. I think we might need a couple more minutes.
That's okay.
Our board member is almost ready. Do we need a few more minutes? Okay, I think maybe we do a round robin and this time start with, well, actually, why don't we start with Uganda this time and then go Becky and this way across through.
She's like, no.
Oh, or Uganda.
I'm not quite ready.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We'll put you last then. We'll start with Becky.
I guess I was a little bit stuck here because I think these first two are, so important to all four of the goals. So then trying to come up with other foundational sort of things, equitable practices in in all the things that we do, everything we bring, that it's equitable, it's accessible to all of our students, so that, and that our staff is highly trained and engaged. But also there was a part of me that's very pragmatic and practical, and I have to take into account that these great goals depend so much on our funding. And we still will be providing great education, but maybe some of the ways that we would do it, not knowing how our funding. So I know that is something that we can't totally control, or our buildings can't totally control, but they have to make decisions based on how they implement this based on the kind of funding that they're given. So I don't know if there's any way to engage that or capitalize. And we also saw, no matter what kind of 4 goals, when you have a worldwide pandemic, you get taken off track. And I know that's not something that you can put in your foundational piece either. So I probably didn't do my assignment right, but that's what I was thinking when I was reading it.
Well, one of the things though I heard is that you acknowledge the first 2 you think are important. So that in and of itself helps us. But I also heard you talk about professional development, because some of what you described wouldn't be a foundation. Some of that wouldn't, but I heard professional development as one of them, and highly trained. That one I've seen. It's an actual initiative that you can lead for.
Okay. Some of the, it's kind of I feel like I'm a little bit of a void to come up with such important little phrasing, because there's so many pieces that go into it. But some of the pieces that come to mind is that I had like staff supported, but what I mean by that is what Becky was saying with highly trained professional development. So that's something that wanting to make sure that our staff has, whether it's the mentoring, whether it's, if I think of like our dual language program expansion, is do they know if we have pre-K to 3rd grade pillars of success, do our dual language teachers have the training they need to teach literacy in Spanish, for example? So like that professional development that needs to happen. And then the other area that I'm trying to put into words is, as we have that accelerated learning for all students, but also focusing on our most vulnerable populations at each of our schools. Because when we look at our graduation rates, we know like our English language learners we're ending up pushing out a large percentage of our English language learners, right? Like plus more than 30% or so. And so like, I think we want all of our students moving forward, but we also know we have some large gaps. And so somehow wording in there that it's for all, but we also want to make sure we're focusing and bringing up all, which means that for some of our students, the gap is so large that we need to be addressing for SPED, for ELL, we'll be talking about that in our board meeting today too. So that's another area of thinking about accelerating, but also focus on the vulnerable populations or who we're failing at this time. And then the highly trained professional development, the community engagement, but not only just community engagement, but for me, it's really about community collaboration and voice. Engagement is one thing. We can do that in a survey or in one sitting, but really truly collaborating with our community. And then the last one I was thinking about is how do we provide the curriculum so that they have, students can actually engage, but also so that we have the materials that and PD that our staff needs to really differentiate for our students. So, thank you.
Really quickly, I want to build on what you just said. So when this is fleshed out under foundations, that should be, I want to say, between 5 to 8 strategies, and some of what you described will actually be written as a specific strategy. Professional development, curriculum, under dynamic and coherent teaching and learning, you would actually have some strategies listed under the initiative.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a foundation under safe and thriving for facilities that are seismically and environmentally safe. We've been working a lot on that in our district to try and get, I think, by 2032 or 2036 to a place where all of our facilities are seismically sound. And that we have, replace some of the buildings that we need to replace as well. That kind of comes along with it. So I think that's a really important goal that we keep in mind because it's a goal that crosses multiple bonds. And when you have a goal that crosses multiple bonds like that, having something in a longer term strategic plan could be really helpful.
Yep.
And then, I only had one, and then Becky spoke up, and I really thought what she was saying about sustainable funding is so important. During my term on the board, or my time on the board, I should say, because it's multiple terms, there was a big push to get more sustainable funding from the state, and that's made a huge difference for our kids. And I believe that we're maybe a half of the way to where we need to be in terms of getting full sustainable funding from the state. We often measure that with something called the Quality Education Model, or the QEM, and having somewhere in there, and I don't know where this sits because this is often the board's role in advocating for things like this, right? It kind of sits at a higher level, but I think it's an important goal that we continue to push for that North Star of full funding for our schools here in Oregon. So that we can, all of the other goals that fall under this are well funded and supported. So those are the two for me.
Thank you.
So for the safety and thriving, I had increase in the use of restorative practices and social and emotional learning. I hear a lot from kids, because they were bullied, they don't want to go to school, they make excuses to going to school. So if we can do, and I think BSD is doing a great job in that. So that would be something. I don't know if it's a foundation or a strategy, but that comes to my mind that's important. And then community and family engagement, also through better communications. There are a lot of different languages spoken in our community. And there are sometimes, BSD may be thinking that they have sent a thing out, but the parent is not getting it somehow. I think we need to make our system a little bit more inclusive of community. So that, because we go reach out to the community for a lot of different things, like for bond and levies and volunteer help, and we have to make our system a bit more acceptable of the community. And the third thing I had aligning our budget priorities to accomplish academic excellence, and that was what Becky and Tom were leading to. There's a lot of responsibility put on board members about trying to advocate for legislative priorities, and sometimes I feel that there needs to be more collaboration between BSD and the board members so that we can actually do that in a better manner. Me being a 2-year-old board member, we need more information to go out and also, should it be all on board members? Can this be done by staff members too? Like where we are trying to get more money for our school district because we are not getting enough. When I say aligning our budget priorities to accomplish academic excellence, we don't have too much left in our budget to really put it for things that we really need to spend on students. And challenging and support systems to make it better. I hear of kids getting into ISB, but they cannot, it becomes too much for them because they can't spend money on, it's just too much. They are smart to get in, but sometimes they cannot come out of it without being depressed, or it's too challenging. So we need to have more support for those students who are smart but cannot finish it because either they are not economically in a space where parents can spend money on tutoring or things that can help them. So we need to think about those things too. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'll take a swing. We'll see. I have a small business, so like a lot of my mindset was around like HR, like talent development and people, and the other one is like business, financial systems. So what I wrote was like kind of always seek and retain diverse top talent and educators, and it kind of had an aspect of like I thought of that was like the development of those people. So you get what you want here, and you grow that person and you keep that person. So Because I think everything on that list is about having really good talent that cares and wants to keep on growing. And then I didn't put financial per se, but I said, constantly innovate, execute world-class systems. So in my mind, and that means like, the financial underpinnings so we can fund everything. Whether you like when Mr. Schofield came in, you build the system where you know where you're at and what you can do. I think that's really important. Those are the kind of world-class systems that allows you to fund different programs to achieve the end result. So I know it's kind of mechanical and kind of business-like, but those are kind of two things that were on my mind. So I'll throw those down.
Ugana?
So I had a lot of things going through my mind, and when I look at pillars for success, and I just made a couple notes. What comes to my mind when it comes to the foundation would be having culturally responsive training for our teachers to ensure the success of every student, especially for our newcomer students and for immigrant students. How do they learn? How do we ensure that no student is left behind? So I think that one of the foundations that we should have there would be ensuring that our teachers are trained in that area and knowing how to respond to students at whatever level that they are, and know how to educate our students from diverse cultures. That's what was jumping through my mind. And another thing was mental health support. How do we continue to support our students' mental health to help them stay in school and be engaged in their learning? So that brings me on the still under pillars for success and safe and thriving. So those are the two things that I would recommend to have in the foundation, just making sure that no student is left behind. We are reaching every student, so those are the two things that came to my mind.
Board members, thank you so
And I wanted to also add something. It reminds me of a trip that we took to Errol Hassel when we went to see their Cairo, I think their Cairo program. It was really, really intriguing to see how the educators there were catering to the students from Africa, and it was really interesting to see that, and being able to teach the students who are still new in the U.S. That was very, very interesting for me, and I appreciated those educators, and I hope that our teachers would have that, again, that culturally responsive training to be able to reach all our students, including our newcomers and our immigrant students.
Thank you. Board members, I want to thank you. You've given us quite a bit to think about. What I can tell you from listening to you, your grain sizes are different grain sizes. And one of the board members so astutely recognized some of what you're describing will be in the strategy work, and some of what you surface could be a foundation, because a foundation is a large grain size. But having said that, much of what you shared, I know we heard in the listening and learning feedback, and much of what you shared, I know will be a solid foundation to support the schools as they focus on these goal areas over the next 5 to 6 years. So let me share what we will be doing next. We're going to utilize your feedback to craft the Beaverton mission statement. We're going to incorporate board and district leadership input in framing up your foundations. We will be convening the 150 plus educators so that we can continue. They're going to share with us their strategies. We're going to be doing that soon. And then we're going to share the components of the strategic plan that I've shared with you today with the core planning team at the next core planning team meeting. And they're going to generate 4 to 5 draft promise statements. I call them tagline, but it's really a promise statement about what we want to students to know in a very short, abbreviated phrase that captures the spirit of the strategic plan. It also is a way to brand the plan. And then we're going to have families and staff and students, everyone to vote on this. And after all that's done, we're going to come back to the board for approval. And I want to share with you some examples of taglines. Now, this is one: successful students today, bright futures tomorrow. This is the one: when I was superintendent, each scholar, a voice, a dream, a bright future. These are just sort of promise statements that they capture that. For example, for us in Federal Way, we wanted a lot of student voice. We wanted to be sure we were doing things that allowed students to choose college, career, whatever that may be. And we wanted our school environments to be inspirational and filled with hope. That's where this particular promise statement came from. So these are the things. We're getting close now to the completion of the strategic plan. And then the hard part happens. Linking it to school improvement planning, setting up times throughout next year to actually lead for this and monitor it and celebrate those incremental steps all along the way. I'm going to stop now, and hopefully you see how your input will be utilized in the mission statement as well as in the foundations, as well as getting an opportunity to vote on the tagline that the core planning team. And Carrie, can you tell me how many people are on a core planning team? Is it about 80? 75, 80 maybe? Anyone who knows? Just to give the board a sense of
Carrie just said it's about 80 people. She doesn't have a
Yep.
mic nearby.
So about 80 people. What I want the board to know and have confidence in, lots of voice and input. So they're going to be doing this, and we'll be sending it out all over the district.
Dr. Campbell, looks like we may be coming to the end, so I just thought I would check in with board members if they had any final questions. Is that appropriate?
Yes, we are. We're at the end.
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Campbell before we conclude our work tonight? Sunita?
This is a 5-year thing, you said, the strategic planning. How do we measure? Do we go every year? Are you going to be supporting us, or is this still board work after this is done? What does it look like?
So the way I frame this up is that I follow up in implementation next year, not quite in the way that I am now, but I'll work with implementation. But you'll have, with each of these goal areas, Sunita, let me go back. I want to show you something. When you get your strategic plan, you're going to actually have goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and goal 4, and you're going to have metrics for each of these. And what you would want to do is have your schools convene at least 2 times a year to come and give progress on, and they do it not one at a time, but in groups. And then at the end of the year, you celebrate where you see growth, but you're going to actually have metrics. So for example, on this document right here, this is how you're going to measure. And we'll spend a little more time. I will spend time with the team getting clear about this. Each student feels safe in the school community. The schools will know for that particular goal area that these are the metrics that'll tell them progress on that goal. That's how that will work. And then there will be a common tool or template for the schools to do that. And then we take all that data, we give progress annually, so the board is monitoring progress. I will tell you, Federal Way, it wasn't until year 2 that we got to get the real traction, because in the first year, they're just getting used to which strategies and doing their PD. It'll be new. Ugana?
So my question is there ever a situation where we would need to review a goal, let's say 1 year, 2 years, and we're not making progress on a goal? Could we decide to review that goal?
So this is what I would strongly say you would look to revise. We would look at our strategies, because there's so much research on the goal areas, like early learning. There is no doubt we should be focusing on that. So what we would do the review on are the strategies. The other thing that I would say, sometimes what's happening in school districts, we change so fast. And you've got to give a chance for the building staff fidelity of implementation. So I strongly urge us to let the schools learn to master the strategies, stay focused and go deep. And I wouldn't even consider doing much change for at least 3 years to see and to make sure they're doing the strategies with fidelity. Because it's that change and sort of constant movement that creates what I call burnout and disillusionment, that this too will pass. And so we stuck with it. We know we're selecting really good strategies. But you do, what we did is at year 5, we pulled our teams, our core planning team back together again. We took one of our goal areas. We realized it was extra. We changed some of our metrics, some of our outcomes, but we had to learn. It took us a while to know what those tweaks were. The other thing is if you move it too fast, people will think that it's going to go away. So once you've done all of this work, I would strongly urge you to let it sit for at least 3 years, and I would hope for 5.
Other questions from the board? Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Campbell. This has been a great session. We appreciate your input and sharing everything, and we look forward to seeing this come in front of us in final form and an opportunity to vote along with the rest of the core team that's coming up as well.
Awesome. I want to just have 2 shout outs. I want to shout out to Carrie Delth and to Dr. Cordy. They have been incredible working behind the scenes. You never know all of the things that have to play out, and they have been phenomenal. I also want to shout out who I think is one of the best superintendents there is, and that's Superintendent Balderas. He is a humble but clear, fierce advocate for students, and I couldn't be prouder to work with him. And Gus, by the way, I'm going to do some work for the Edmonds Foundation. They miss you. So just wanted to tell you that as well.
Thanks for your work, Tammy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the kind words.
And thank you to everyone who's supporting this work across our district. Yeah. All right, with that, we'll end our work session here, and we will come back with the school board meeting at 7:30 p.m.
Thank you, board members. Appreciate all of your feedback and input tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell.